Good day, everyone. I am Rosemary Espiritu, and I'm from Group 6 and I'm the first reporter. And our topic is about the political and legal environment. First is the Burger King case, Israel branch. Burger King Corporation, owned by UK, operates in almost 60 countries and territories. In May, an Israeli company that holds the local franchise opened its 47th branch in Ma'ale Adumim, a huge sprawling Jewish settlement in the disputed West Bank just northeast of Jerusalem. So when Arab American and Muslim groups got wind of this branch, they were furious and swiftly threatened a worldwide boycott of Burger King. Nagplano sila ng boycott to close the franchise, sinasabi na may problem when it comes to territory. Meanwhile, the Israeli franchise refused to obey Burger King's orders to stop operating the Ma'ale Adumim outlet. The restaurant continues to dish out its high-fat fare under the familiar orange and white signs. Naniniwala sila that within their legal rights, may rights sila to keep the restaurant open, logo and all. Dito sa case na to or the Burger King case illustrates political constraints and political risks are part and parcel of conducting business across national boundaries. That when facing multiple national constituencies, it is often difficult to meet the demands of one constituency without aggravating the other. So the MNE must not only respond to respond pressure extend by these constituents. Dapat maging proactive din sila in identifying and responding to their concerns. Na kung yung political environment in-identifies yung mga key constituents ng national borders or national business, the legal environment set the rules. Parang the rules of the game as well as the range within which legitimate business activity is conducted. Next naman is political environment. Pumapasok dito yung political behavior. The acquisition, development, securing, and use of power in relation to other entities, where power is viewed as the capacity of social actors to overcome the resistance of other actors. It's like how are we going to act in a set of political factors and government activities in a foreign market that can either facilitate or hinder a business abilities to conduct business activities in the foreign market. Nakapasok din dito yung political process. So are viewed by economists as constraints on the free flow of production factors, intermediary and final goods that distort supply and demand. From the word process, kung ano yung flow or magiging takbo ng business according to its political constraints, but it does not represent only constraints. Sinasabi dito na yung nature of international business activity na influence the political constraints in the political agenda. Example nito is importers. They are typically concerned with achieving such goals as tariff reduction. Tapos yung exporters naman, nire-reduce nila yung limitations on high technology exportation. Dito pumapasok yung affinity or animosity. Affinity or animosity between nations reflecting how closely aligned or estranged nations are based on history and political reality. It is an important determinant of international business relations. Sinasabi dito na nations that share a historical bond and political affinity katulad ng US and United Kingdom tend to have high levels of mutual trade and investment kasi para sila ng nangyari in the past. Sinasabi na yung affinity or animosity plays a big role in the international business kasi parang ini-introduce sila sa marketing literature to help marketers better understand the factors that influence consumer attitudes toward foreign products. Next naman is the M&A government relationship. The relationship with government in its host and home countries is probably the most important political challenge for the M&A. The relationship, kasi di ba dapat due process pa rin siya. May basis pa rin yung mga law natin. Because the government affects the economic and legal environment in which the M&A operates. So, need ng magandang relationship ng M&A within the government. Naapektuhan kasi ng government ang activities ng mga M&A. For example, ito is via setting monetary and tax policies, setting price controls, enacting, endorsing, enforcing intellectual property legislation, and influencing labor relations. Responsible din sila for trade and investment policies. So, government have an essential role kasi sila yung nagpa-facilitate and nag-regulate ng mga international business. So, the interactions between economic, political, legal mechanisms of government have a direct impact on the flow of trade and can have impacts for both domestic and international businesses. Next naman is the M&E relationship with the host government. Three models have been used in the past to analyze the government-M&E relationship. Ito yung sovereignty at bay, dependency Venus, neo-mercantilism. Sovereignty at Bain model goes the furthest by viewing the M&E as a threat to the national sovereignty of the host country. Yung dependency model naman also sees a cooperative relationship but only between the MNE and its home government. Tapos yung neo-mercantilism, isa siyang policy that encourages exports, tapos dinidiscourage niya yung imports. Sila nagko-control ng capital movement and centralized currency decisions in the hands of a central government. Next is the relationship of MNE with the host government. The nature of the relationship between MNEs and host governments can perhaps be best described as cooperation. Pinagsamang cooperation and competition. Sinasabi na yung cooperation nagre-reflects ng elements of mutual accommodation and collaboration with the government and the MNE, seeking joint payoffs and goal accomplishments from their independent activities or resources. Tapos yung competition naman reflection ng elements of bargaining or control and related conflicts with the government and the MNE. Sila yung nagsisik ng private gains at the expense of each other's interests. MNE political objectives in the host country. Goal nila is the establishment of a favorable trade and investment environment. Meaning nito, non-discrimination. Namely, equal treatment of foreign firm. Parang nag-strive sila to remove the limit on foreign ownership para maging open sa local markets like no tariff. Ganon. Sa madaling salita, goal nila is to remove any obstacle that interfere with its freedom to locate, manufacture, and sell where it can deplot its resources most effectively and obtain the highest return. Gusto rin nilang ma-reduce yung mandatory requirement for product or service adaptation, especially when they judge adaptation to be unnecessary is term of competitive advantage or customer preferences. M&E in the host environment. Goal for the M&E in the host environment is to obtain legitimacy. Another goal ng M&E to. Kasi yung legitimacy is the acceptance of the MNE as a national organ in the local environment. Kung anong ma-contribute sa local economy, tapos tinitingnan pa rin nila yung social responsibility nila and tinitake nila to seriously. Parang it's all about positive corporate citizenship. Isang good investment to para ma-improve yung MNE's bargaining power. And lastly is the local government objectives. It is about protecting national interests, especially where vital interests such as national security are concerned. Host government are concerned yung protect nila ng environment nila from pollutions, unsustainable logging, and the like. Yun lang. Thank you for listening.
For the continuation of our report, I will be reporting the bargaining power of the MNE and the host government. When political objectives of the MNE and the host nation diverge, their relative bargaining power will, to a significant extent, determine the outcome. When a nation offers an attractive environment that is unmatched by other locations, its bargaining power is high, especially when competition among investors is intense. Kagaya ng ginawa ng China, when investment opportunities emerge in Eastern and Central Europe, ang ginawa ng China ay nilighten ng investment requirements para kahit maraming opportunity sa Europe ay ma-attract pa rin ng mga investors. Pero kalaunan, binawi rin ito ng China ng umusbong ang mga foreign investors. In the end, the outcome of the bargaining is not only the result of such advantages, but also the success of the parties in building political coalitions, which will be discussed later on. The bargaining power of the enemy tends to be greater when it offers differentiated, technologically advanced products that others cannot provide. Other grounds to know how an enemy has a stronger bargaining position is when the subsidiary is complex to operate and manage, when its volume of exports is large, and when the ratio of expatriates is high. So next is government investment support. In an era of team competition for FDI, or foreign direct investments, Governments compete with each other and are willing to bargain with the MNE over the provision of investment incentives. These incentives typically are administered by a designated investment agency whose main roles are to solicit potential investors, weigh project feasibility, and contribute to national goals, as well as to ensure compliance with investment requirements. Usually, special support is often provided to MNEs willing to invest in troubled areas or in priority regions para ma-develop yung land and may turn into commercial na magbibigay ng opportunity not only for the country but its people. However, the main problem of domestic firms is discrimination and are not provided the same support and incentives available to foreign investor. Ito yung nagiging rason kung bakit nagkakaroon ng alliances or political coalition to counterbalance incentives sa mga foreign entity. Kaya nagkakaroon ng bogus blue eyes ventures o yung mga domestic firms disguised as foreign investors. So next is M&E and its home government. Despite globalization, the MNE remains firmly grounded in its host environment. The state continues to charter the MNE, shape its operating environment, and remain the only patent entity to conduct international affairs, including trade and investment policies. The home government plays an important role in facilitating the MNE political objectives. It is also applied in the closure of the home market to foreign competition. Next is coalition building and influence tactics. But before we fully explain coalition building, I would like to define what coalition building first. Coalition building is when members share responsibility, goals, decision, and leadership and energetically and enthusiastically work toward a common goal. The coalition has the potential for great success. Nations and governments are not unitary entities, but rather collections of individuals, political patterns, interest groups, and agencies that negotiate internally as much as externally to define and achieve their objectives and that have different agendas. One example would be the 1997 deal between Microsoft and Apple. The deal consisted of Microsoft rescuing the then struggling Apple with an infusion of $150 million. So that concludes my report. The preceding topics will be discussed by the next reporter, Shadzay Ramos.
Good day, everyone. I am Shatsay Ramos and I will be discussing political risk. It is with no doubt that there are huge risks for any multinational enterprise, and one of those is political risk. Why is it risky? It says here that political risk is the probability of disruptions to an MNE's operation from political forces and events and their correlates, which means that the decisions of a country's leader will ripple effect to the operations such as producing and delivering goods and services in different countries of a multinational enterprise. An example of this would be the increasing separatist sentiment in the Aceh province in Indonesia. And if a certain group seeks autonomy from a country, then the country could not control its trading, and when that happens, the separatists could eliminate or choose the MNEs they'll approve of. There are many aspects to political risk. It is not just about political stability, instead, it is also about a stable society, economic and regulatory climate, policy continuity, and the likelihood of unforeseen problems for the trader and investor. Decisions of the government usually stems from how a society acts, how much the climate and environment affects the people and what the future problems are. And of course, political risk is a problem for the foreign trader and investor, but especially for the latter, who commits resources to the host country. Political narrows the decision making span of the foreign investor. If the host country is politically unstable, then it may lead to MNEs to refrain investing in a country. These are the latest ranking of countries who are economically free. Coming in first is Singapore, next is New Zealand, third is Australia, fourth Switzerland, fifth Ireland, sixth is Taiwan, seven United Kingdom, eighth is Estonia, nine Canada, and tenth is Denmark. More economically free countries tend to also experience greater rates of investment, faster economic growth, and higher per capita incomes. To measure political risk, there are five options. But before that, we must discuss why it is so hard to measure political risk. It is hard to forecast, and change may come as a result of a decision by an autocratic ruler, a political misstep, or a shift in power or balance. But more importantly, there are the more measurement of political risk. Qualitative approach involves identifying threats or opportunities. Qualitative approach are often used in fields that are concerned with human behavior, such as social sciences. This is particularly helpful in understanding the context of phenomena and how they affect individuals and groups. Aggregates of expert opinions achieved with the help of experts who exchange information, cultures, and experiences. Expert opinions are scientific views or comments by a group of designated experts based on a review of scientific evidence and or expert opinions. Scenario approaches contains a set of assumptions, rules, and tools including but not limited to the process outline which govern the process of scenario planning. It is when a future scenario is expected to come and probably simulated in order to govern the probable solution to this certain scenario. Decision tree methods are used for establishing classification systems. A decision tree is a support tool with a tree-like structure that models probable outcomes, costs of resources, utilities, and possible consequences. Decision trees provide a way to present algorithms with conditional control statements. They include branches that represent decision making steps that can lead to a favorable result. Quantitative techniques are objective measurements and the statistical, mathematical, or numerical analysis of data collected through polls, questionnaires, and surveys or by manipulating pre existing statistical data using computational techniques. There are also types of political risk. Ownership risk represents a threat to the current ownership structure, or the current ownership structure to the ability of the MNE to select or shift to a governance structure. Operational risk includes any change to the rule of the game under which the foreign firm operates. Example, new and arbitrary taxation, especially when foreign firms are singled out. Transfer risk, impediments to the transfer of production factors. Example, newly imposed capital controls. So, ownership political risk is the inherent risk in maintaining corporate property and the lives of host country employees, while operating political risk is the threat of interference in day to day operational tasks. And transfer political risk addresses the danger of a corporation losing the ability to transfer profits and money from the host country back to the home country. So, with these risks, How do firms manage political risk? Let us move on to the strategies for managing political risk. First would be minimize outright investment, leasing rather than buying, and relying on government incentives where available. Ibig sabihin, one should not invest too much agad and be an opportunity sa mga government investments. Instead of buying, leasing is a more temporal and smart choice when unsure. Next is to sign bilateral or multilateral treaties that protect foreign investments to protect investments sa ibang nation. There should be an equal agreement for both countries which mediates and becomes the guidelines when there are issues between the two parties or two countries. To identify or create reciprocal settings where investment from the host country can be seized in case of expropriations. Dito naman, in case kukunin ng country ang pinag-investa ni investor for public use, an MNE should identify or create a reciprocal setting, which means na same terms din ang gagawin ng isang enterprise sa kanilang home country. So, whatever the host country does sa investment ng enterprise, this should be made din to reflect what they did sa kabilang country. Next is to avoid high visibility acquisitions, especially of firms or assets viewed as national icons. Reduce capital exposure by utilizing host country financing, accelerate profit repatriation, the ability of a firm to send foreign earned profits or financial assets back to the firm's home country in hard currency such as USD, Euro, and others after meeting the host nation's tax obligations. This is done kasi yung mga currency like USD, Euro, or hard currencies are those that are high currencies. Next is develop a staggered technology transfer policy. Source locally, reducing the host country incentive to harm the foreign firm. Use local products from the home country of the enterprise. Opt for strategic alliances with a local partner, reducing the foreign investor outlays and pacifying nationalist sentiment. Utilize agencies such as overseas private investment corporations in the US, which insures companies against political risk. And insurance is always important para may fallback ang isang company once the risk it took endangered the company. Next is to build political support at home and in the host nation through lobbying, public relations, and a proactive social responsibility. Then monitor political and economic development so as to prepare, avoid, or counter intervention. Next, we will go to regional level politics. Although the national government is the most influential in the political arena, it is not the only one to do so. Because it is not only the national government, but the state level, regional, and federated organizations that are partners to MNEs. In Hong Kong, a Chinese Special Administrative Region has its own trade and investment agreements with foreign countries. In Canada, provincial governments play a substantial trade and investment regulation. Lastly, in America, various states lure foreign car manufacturers by providing benefits and incentives. In microregion political processes, even municipalities play a role in international business. Microregions take a stronger interest in foreign investment since they know that such investments are vital to economic growth. A former French prime minister once said that governments are too small to deal with big problems and too big to deal with small problems. Which is why cities are now competing with one another to attract people who can choose to live where they wish, but also cooperate and establish alliances with each other. This shows the European investment in the Greater Columbus, Ohio area, where Austria has one and United Kingdom has 15 Chamber of Commerce, which just shows that sub-regions are increasingly involved in inward foreign investment. Thank you. And the next reporter is Antoinette Figueroa.
Good day po, I'm Antoinette Figueroa and my topic is the legal environment. When we say legal, it means to say that it is based on or concerned with the law. Ang mga gobyerno sa bawat bansa ang nagre-regulate ng mga business ayon sa mga priorities nito. Sila ang gumagawa ng legal system sa isang bansa. The laws which are passed by the government for business operation is called legal environment. They regulate the business activities in every country, which is also considered as legal environment. The limits for business operations are decided by regulatory environment, and this is called legal environment. There are three legal systems that are traced to past centuries. Number 1 is common law. Common law is associated with an independent judiciary relying on case precedents. Common law was originally developed by judges through case-by-case court decisions, rather than through legislation enacted by a legislature. Sa system na to, karamihan sa mga law ay nagawa sa desisyon ng mga judges na ang tawag ay president. Ibig sabihin lang nito, kailangan sundin ng korte yung reasoning sa pag-resolve sa similar case na ginamit sa past in prior decision. Common law systems also rely on statutes that are passed by the legislature or parliament, and judges have the role of interpreting how the legislature's laws are applied in individual cases. For example is the U.S., with the exemption of Louisiana, which has a mix of civil and common law, and UK are examples of common law systems. Number 2 is civil law. Civil law relies exclusively on the legal code and is applied universally. Itong system na ito, mas nagre-rely siya sa academic legal experts para makagawa ng mga legal interpretations. The judge's role in this system is to establish the facts of the case and to analyze and apply the legislature's written laws. Number 3 is theocratic law, also known as religious law. It is a system that relies on religious code. In this system, criminal law is based mainly on religious texts and interpretations of those texts. Religious legal systems kabilang ang mga canon law, for example is yung Roman Catholic and Anglican, Islamic law, and Talmudic law, or the Jewish law. Kahit sa mga bansa na may common and civil law systems, yung mga religious courts lang ang makakarinig ng mga matters tulad ng sa kasal, divorce, and yung inheritance, para sa mga may iba't ibang pananampalataya kung ang isang bansa ay may iba't ibang religious groups. Legal jurisdiction. Legal jurisdiction is the legal authority under which a legal case can be adjudicated. The MNE is subject to the laws of both its home and host countries, and less often to the laws of a third country. Yung mga laws na ito pwede maging conflict dahil sa ang pagsunod sa isang legal jurisdiction pwedeng matawag na hindi pagsunod or violation sa isa pang legal jurisdiction. Halimbawa na lang yung compliance ng mga Arab boycott sa Israeli products ay violation na sa US law. This is the country rankings on the fair administration of justice, based on survey results according to the World Competitiveness Yearbook. Sa dulo ng ranking makikita ang list ng halos mga developing and emerging companies. There are jurisdictional levels that govern multinational enterprise operations. First is the international level. Dito sa level na to, a firm is subject to international law and to a rapidly internationalizing regulatory system. Second is in regional global level. Dito naman, a firm is subject to the laws and regulations of a regional entity. The more na integrated yung region, the more na mas importante yung mga laws enacted dun sa level na yun. And lastly, the national level. Whether in its host country, and sometimes third country, it remains the most important and relevant for the multinational enterprise. However, ang national jurisdiction level na ito is enforced and madalas na mahirap i-determine. International jurisdiction. This refers to the power of a court or other organization to hear and determine matters between different countries or persons of different countries or foreign state. It is rarely enforced because international law relies on treaties and customs. Institutions tulad ng ibang UN institutions na walang jurisdictions, kadalasan halos sa ibang cases, unless yung mga government na involved ay papayag na mag-submit sa korte ng kaso. Parties to international business contracts often agree in advance on arbitration authority that specializes in arbitration between firms from the region and U.S. companies. Regional jurisdiction. Regional bodies are enacting and enforcing laws. Regional bodies are taking responsibility for the enactment and enforcement of laws. At times, malaking kawalang katiyakan ang nangingibabaw sa kung ang regional jurisdiction ay papalit sa national jurisdiction. For example, yung European Court of Justice gumawa ng batas na walang Europe country ang maglilimit ng trade sa products na imported sa Europe. National jurisdiction. Multinational enterprises must comply with both domestic jurisdiction at home and foreign jurisdiction abroad. Ibig sabihin lang nito, ang mga multinational enterprises ay kailangang sumunod sa jurisdiction ng bansa nila and ng foreign. Mahuhulog under sa domestic jurisdiction ang karamihan sa mga foreign operations nito. If they do not comply on the jurisdictions, mahihirapan silang i-resolve ang mga disputes na may encounter nila involve ang kanilang foreign operations. This may result to the multinational enterprises to become more vulnerable to suits filed at home concerning their foreign operations.
Legal issues that are particular concern to the MNA include the protection of corporate and individual property, contract law, the United Nations Convention on Contract for International Sales of Goods sets standards for the formulation and enforcement of contracts among its signatories, as well as restriction on foreign asset ownership. For example, the United States does not permit foreign entities to own a majority share in a U.S. airline in case its aircraft are needed to emergency deployment of American troops. This rule was used to block a British Airways attempt to acquire a controlling stake in U.S. Air, a U.S. carrier. Ibig sabihin nito, naglalagay sila ng boundary para rin sa protection nila. Knowing product origin is important for determining duties or for measuring local contents, a frequent requirement in trade and FDI. Local content is an especially important issue in developing economics. For example, India requires substantial local content for cars produced domestically by foreign manufacturers. By determining product origin is increasingly complex. U.S. has an example of this. U.S. Federal Trade Commission determined that a product to be labeled made in USA, it must be all or virtually all made in the United States and should not contain no or negligible foreign content. However, it is clear that negligible means ibig sabihin nito, ang isang bansa na gumagawa ng isang product, kailangan sa kanila mismo din nanggagaling mga raw materials para masabi na gawa ito sa kanilang bansa mismo. Competition laws. Competition laws has two types. First, antitrust legislation and enforcement. Antitrust legislation is among the most advanced in a model accumulated by several countries. For example, Japan antitrust legislation dates back to Allied occupation, and its American heritage is evidence. In contrast, the United States, however, antitrust laws are seldom enforced in Japan. The state possesses the most stringent transparency requirements, and it's willing to enforce its authority abroad. Meaning, antitrust legislation is to protect consumers from predatory business practices. They ensure that fair competition exists in an open market economy. The second type is subsidies. Europe rules provide government subsidies that give an unfair edge to a firm of one country over another. The Commission tried but failed to prevent the French government from providing a briefly subsidy to Air France. Subsidy is a general special money payment by a government to one or more firms in a favored industry, usually the purpose of enabling them to sell one or more of their product at a price below their cost of production, or at least at a price below the free market price. Marketing and distribution laws. National laws determine allowable practices in distribution, advertising, and promotion. For example, TV cigarette advertising is prohibited in many countries. Norway does not permit 2-for-1 promotion. In France, a manufacturer cannot offer a product it does not manufacture as the endorsement to buy one of its products. Meaning, ang bawat bansa ay merong sariling practices sa pag-distribute, advertise, and promote ng isang product. Hindi lang basta-basta nagpo-promote or nag-advertise. Product liability laws. Product liability laws are stringent in the United States and the Europe and many other developed countries, but are lax or not enforceable in many developing economies. Product liability is the area of law in which manufacturer, distributors, suppliers, and retailers are held responsible for any injuries product caused, regardless of any contractual limitations of liability. If a product or any of its component parts are defective, its manufacturer may be liable for the damage under the Consumer Protection Act or the common law of negligence. In Japan, product liability cases are rarely brought to count, partly because it is more difficult to prove negligence. Treaties are agreements signed by two bilateral or more multilateral nations in the United States. Treaties require Senate approval, but executive agreements do not. A multilateral treaty is ratified by many countries with a joint interest in the issue in hand of called lawmaking treaty. Some of the international institutions described, such as International Labor Office, have their origin in maritime treaties. Treaties of friendship, commerce, and navigation provide firms from the signatory countries with the same rights and privilege enjoy the domestic businesses in the other country. Many of those treaties contain most favorable nation clause that entities the signatories state to a treatment as favorable as the provided of other countries. In short, treaty is any legally binding agreement between nations. Two international treaties govern patent protection. Una is yung Paris Convention for the Protection of Industrial Property, which has been ratified by many countries but not some by newly industrialized economies that are among the main violators of such rights. The convention guarantees equal treatment of application from member countries. It set 1 year grace period from the time of application of one country during which the filer enjoys priority in registration the patent in other signatory countries. It also prevents the automatic expiry of the patent in all member countries when a patent has expired in one. The second is International Treaty Governing Patent Protection. It is the Patent Corporation Treaty, which permits a one-stop application for patent in all signatory countries.